The way we're going to structure this is a rather didactic session from me with a few slides, which is some information about the application process. So it's not very exciting, but hopefully will be useful to you. And then information about life as a CL. We've invited some CLs along. They may pitch up because I'm hoping you get a bit of near-peer stuff. But let's see how we go with that. But then we can have a broad discussion. But before I go into this slightly boring business, I do want to say that I think a CL is a fantastic opportunity. If you are interested in academic medicine, you should apply for a CL at some point. There's nothing to lose, literally, because you're in a training post by definition. Why not apply? It might be your lucky year. So that would be the overall thing. So eligibility is quite important to get this right, particularly as you're coming to the end of a PhD, you're writing up. There'll be clinical lecturer posts coming up in March, for instance, and I'll go through that. And the question is, could you apply for one of those? And the answer is, at the application deadline, you must have submitted your PhD. If you've not submitted it, you can't apply. You can be interviewed and you can be awarded a CL position without your PhD have been awarded, but you cannot take up the post. Please come in. But you cannot take up the post of a CL without your PhD being awarded. By awarded, we accept the examiner's report that the PhD is now satisfactory. You don't need to wait till we've had some medieval process up and down. So as long as your PhD examiners say that you are now ready to receive your PhD, you're good. You have to have a national training number in your speciality. So I suspect, William, this would be an issue for you. So most people applying for a CL have, but if you haven't, then you need to apply for national benchmark. In other words, apply for training as an ST3 or 4, whatever in your speciality, and go through that process. But you don't have to be awarded a post through that process. You just have to be deemed appointable. Does that make sense? Good. Now, the application is a process that you've not been through before. It's not using Orion. It's using the University of Cambridge system, which is just as arcane. You'll be asked to produce a CV, which, free text CV, a standard form, and then importantly, a cover letter. And that is a letter from you to the interviewers saying what you're going to do in your CL post. And that's a very important part of the application. We can talk about what might be in it later on. So I think I've got this right. This is the list of posts that will become available in March of next year. And we can discuss the details later if you like, but I want to make some general points with this. So you can see how many we've got. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8-ish. And a separate one, which I'll come back to. And these are NIHR posts, and we'd probably make an equivalent number of local CL posts in the year. So we're talking about 16 to 20 CL posts a year, roughly speaking. So that's not many. Each of these ones is badged to 3 specialities. So if you're, for instance, sitting here as a trauma and orthopedics person, your competition is cardiology and respiratory to get a post. So that's the first thing to absorb, is you'll be competing with other people in different specialities. Some of these posts have a theme against them. Some of them don't. The ones that have a theme against them do so because these are the NIHR priority themes. In other words, Department of Health research priority themes. And you can see from the description that these are very topical. And so most years we have dementia, for instance, because that's a very national priority. Now, it is important that you fit what you say you're going to do roughly towards these themes. It's even better if what you're going to do is actually in one of these themes. You can certainly fall down an interview if you come in for a digital post saying you want to send everyone pen and paper and you don't trust computers or something. I mean, that isn't going to work. Yes.
Can I ask a question about the theme? Because obviously research projects start off in one way.
Yes.
And may not go that way.
Yes.
So in terms of your accountability against NIHR,
Yeah.
as long as it,
Yeah.
That's what I want to know.
So there are no NIHR policemen or policewomen who come and check an individual and how they're doing in terms of their research. You honestly don't need to worry about it once you've been appointed. We have had for the first time an email threatening that as a programme will be audited on this as a programme. I haven't heard any more about that.
I don't think it was a threat so much as they were just curious about how many people were sticking to their
Yes.
more of a kind of a research thing they were doing.
Okay. You're so much more positive about these emails. I just see these sinister motivations in them. But yeah. So, there may be a checkup, but at the level of an individual.
A reasonable question. When it says elderly with mental health folks, is that medicine of the elderly?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that's an abbreviation. Yeah, medicine for the elderly.
Just to say the old age psychiatry has changed to child and adolescent psychiatry.
Thank you. Yes, I've forgotten that bit. Yeah, thank you.
Is there any significance to the underlying specialties?
Yes, it's a very boring one, but it is worth knowing. So the underlying specialities are the speciality who are going to organise the interviews. So Cato doesn't organise these interviews. So if we take the top one, it'll be the paediatrics department who call when the CL interview takes place. And that could be any time from March 2025 through to August 2026. Because the one restriction on the timing is that the person who is chosen must be in post by September of the following year. So in this case, September 26. So the CL interview could happen in March, April, May, June, July, And as long as the successful candidate is in post by the following September, all is well.
Sorry, my next question then. So if you are, say you get appointed in October.
Yep.
Could you pick it up, say in March, when you're next due to rotate?
Absolutely. So you can certainly request that. You're not the final arbiter of it because the training program director or whoever may have their own agenda and may ask you to come at another time, but you can certainly request it. And you can see this post has slipped in on that basis. So this post was badged to two other specialities and failed to appoint. And so we changed the specialities and are re-advertising it. But this person has to be in post in September this year. Does that make sense? I know this is all very tedious, but it can make a real difference if people don't understand the process. Any questions about that?
A few more small questions. If old age psych has become CAMT, where did old age psych go? Is it still within that bracket with medicine for the elderly?
Old age psych has gone.
Oh, it's got. Oh, okay.
And that was Graham Murray's decision. So if you have an axe to grind about that, you
and the other thing is how fluid are these groupings year to year?
Yeah. So, or in other words, how did these specialities arise like this?
Yeah, will they stay the same in the next 3 or 4
They
years?
will not stay the same. So the way this process works is that every 2 years, we have to bid to the NIHR to ask for posts. And that's actually happening at the moment. So I have no idea how many posts we have next year. In the summer of this year, we'll find out how many posts we've got. And then we have a huge fight about who's going to get the post. And this is where I lose any friends I've managed to acquire in the preceding 2 years. And we make a plan for the next 2 years. And we try hard to to give everyone a reasonable shout, being aware that some specialities are more popular than others. Some specialities refuse to have an academic trainee, but we've had that. So it's a bit of a mix. So what you see here will not be replicated exactly next year. But the hope is that every good trainee sitting here today will have a shot in the next 2 years at something that's appropriate. That's the hope.
What if your speciality is not on the list?
What's your specialty?
So anaesthetics and ICM.
Yeah, so
That's
we,
two that jump out at me.
we've appointed down this year,
Yeah.
2 posts.
Do you have to point your research project towards something more relevant to the list?
So if you're an anaesthetist and anaesthetics doesn't appear
Yeah.
here, you can't do it. You've got to wait till your speciality comes
Yeah.
out.
Okay. So they kind of, you wait till there's an appropriate point. Yeah.
This is for NIHR.
Yeah.
So you would want to look carefully at the list that appears in the summer. And I mean, it won't appear publicly in the summer, but we'll make it available in the summer. And that'll be for the year after, and then we'll change it for the year after that. So one of the things that's very difficult for you guys, which I completely accept, is that you can't look 3 years ahead and say, that's the job I want, because we won't be able to tell you that. The alternative or the additional stream is a local CL post, which follows everything exactly as we've described, except that the funding comes locally, which means that your speciality will have to give up a training post, not supernumerary, and you will give half-time clinical service to that post and half-time research, which will be funded by someone else. It could be a grant, it could be the deanery, it could be soft money that the department has. All those things are possible. And the advantage to a department is that they will not have this competition. They will say, we medical genetics want our own CL, we're going to set up a local CL, it will only be for medical genetics, for instance.
Let's say you arrange something because they know they have a candidate in their specialty that they want to do.
That's what a good department will do.
So they have to advertise so everyone can
Yes.
apply.
Yes. So it has to be openly advertised, and everything else follows what I'm about to say about the NIHR. But what I would say, and this may surprise you, is the number of applicants we get is low. The CL posts. So we might get, rheumatology, we might get none, we might get 1. Renal would probably get 1. Gastro, 1 or 2. That's the sort of number of applicants. Now, they're all very high standard. And the reason I think is because by the time you get to CL level, there are not many good people who want to stay in academic medicine in your area. There certainly aren't people who are going to move. I mean, there are some exceptions sitting at the back, but most CLs will not move. They'll want to stay where they are. So the competition is actually just with a few other people, but they may well be very good.
A question about the interviews this year. At what point will we find out when Plastics called the interview for my responsibilities?
Yeah, so I'll come. So the way it works is Plastics are in charge, but because it's an NIHR post, they will get advertised nationally, and they'll appear on the Cato website,
No, they appear
Deanery.
on the university's job site.
university's job site. And I think there's a pointer to them from the NIHR site.
I'm not sure, to be
I'm
honest.
not sure. Yeah, so
It links to my question actually.
Yeah.
So obviously, I'd love to stay in Cambridge.
Yeah.
One might want to explore what other paediatric CL posts are out there.
Yeah.
The NIHR in the past has put out a list of all the posts available and definitely,
yes.
are they doing that again?
Well, I think they are. I can see Louise is looking.
I think they probably do. What they don't know is exactly when we will be
Yeah.
recruiting for that post.
So you then need
So
to
like-
get in touch with each
Yeah, yeah.
department and be like, by the way, I'm interested.
Yeah,
Yeah.
when they do recruiting. Yeah.
So I think in March at some point, you'll see the list of CL posts available in each centre. But you won't know when that, the NIHR funded ones,
Yeah.
but you won't know when they're going to come up. So you're going to have to be crafty. And they will be advertised. Okay, let me just keep pushing on. I've done that. These are the timelines. So, I mean, actually we've changed this. Last year, we told everyone they had to interview between May and June because we wanted to kind of streamline this process and make it very predictable. Actually, we're backing off that now because some specialities said, well, I've got a really good person who's coming up on this date. Can we delay things? And actually, we do allow that. So that might happen. Okay, so here's the interview. So you just get one interview. You used to have to do two, but thankfully it's just one. And there'll be a lot of people there because there'll be 3 specialities represented almost certainly. So you'll have NHS people or TPD from your speciality, and 2 others. You will have senior people from the university. So often Patrick Maxwell will be chairing this. He's the Regis. And there may well be other senior folk like Joe or whatever around. And, you know, you won't know who they are and they'll be slightly intimidating. There'll be maybe someone from the deanery. Often there isn't because they'll pre-screen your application. And a new thing is that we're going to have a lay rep sitting on interviews. But if you add up all of this, there might be 6, 8 people there doing the interview. And obviously you might find your renal colleagues very cuddly, but there could be a nasty orthopedic surgeon there, orthopedic and neurosurgeon, you know, who's sharpening his knives and doing all sorts of distracting behaviours. So it is quite intimidating, I have to be honest. We try not to be. There's no fixed format. You can't look up what questions are going to be asked, which you could for ACF, but the questions are entirely predictable. They will be about your clinical training. You might be asked a clinical case scenario. They will be about what you've done in the past, but most importantly, they'll be about your future research plans. And I would say that's what makes or breaks a good CL application. You'll be asked whether you're going to do teaching, and the answer is yes, I will, but not too much, because my research is so important to me, Mom. So you have to get that answer right. You'll have to explain how on earth it is that you're going to stay on the transplant rota and work in a lab 3 days a week. And, you know, people will want to know that you've thought that through. And then you will definitely be asked a question on research culture or patient public engagement. So, have I characterised that right, Joe, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's face-to-face or virtual?
So the edict now is that we do them face-to-face. That occasionally breaks down if we have someone who's from far, far away, but it should be face-to-face. Yeah.
How do you score answers? Like, how do people,
We don't score.
how do you mark?
We just say, what tie was he wearing? Let me just. Yeah, no, we don't score. So it's, in a way, it's a very old-fashioned system. And maybe vulnerable to it, but we've got a lot of independent-minded people around. And I would say if there was a scoring scheme, that is the highest part of it. That's next. And I don't know, maybe I think this is quite important. I personally find that quite useful. But it's your research plans that are key. And what people will want to know is that you have some plans, that they're feasible, and that you've talked to people about what they are, and you know where you're going to do it. And you've got some sensible goals that are not too ridiculously ambitious. Do you think, Joe?
Yeah, I think the other thing is that you're the right person to do it.
Yes.
And I think that comes across, you know, when you're talking about your past experience, by the time you get to your future research, it should be pitched that not only have I got these plans, but of the plans that I've been working
Yeah.
towards, and that you're the right person to do them.
Yeah, that all roads have converged on you taking this job with this project, yeah. And very quickly, we talk about CL posts, so they're 4 years unless you go part-time. 50% research, 50% clinical. How you arrange that is entirely up to you. So a standard approach is blocks, I'll say 3 months or 6 months, where you're 100% one thing and 100% the other thing. And that at another time. That works pretty well if you're dovetailing with another CL in your department. So you're providing one post and that works. Alternatively, you do a split week where you rock up for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, whatever. And we, as it were, Cato, are completely agnostic about this. Your research may well determine which is the best of these. And it'll have to fit in with your department. So this requires quite a lot of discussion. And it depends a lot on whether you're buddying up with another CL, say, or someone doing a research. That can make a big difference. But the important point from our perspective is that you can try whatever you want. A CL comes to an end if you take up a consultant appointment, including a locum consultant appointment. That came as a surprise to one of our CLs 2 weeks ago when she took up an appointment. And it also comes to an end if you get any sort of funded fellowship. And a classic error here has been those of you who are doing surgery, who do a 1 year post-CCT fellowship in Ontario on this or that. A lot of folk imagine that can be absorbed into a CL, so it definitely can't. So even if it's a kind of clinical fellowship, there's some very rare exceptions to that, one of which is the local AZ fellowship, which is designed to fit in with CLs. So just be aware of that. And the other thing is that if during your CL post, your CCT happens, then a wonderful, miraculous thing can happen, which is that you can get a post-CCT extension. So your CL can continue, but you're now no longer required to train, and therefore your clinical service can go down to 20%. So your research is 80%. Now, I think this is a fantastic opportunity. And my view is that you should try and time this so that you start your CL with roughly 2 years to go before you hit CCT. So you can get roughly 2 years of funding afterwards. Most you can get is 2 years.
How does it work with craft specialties?
Yes, good question.
Because it sounds awesome, but equally, might be rusty
Yeah.
after 2 years.
Yes, you're quite right. So that 20% can go up to 40% if you want to do lots of intubations or whatever you guys do. It all looks very easy.
Tubes and holes.
There's no way you have to do all that.
Yeah,
Does anyone please send you this? Who does what at what time?
We police it.
We did.
Yeah, because it matters to us that people get what they should get. So we have had fights where, a typical fight, typical fight is that someone's doing a surgical specialty. This is what often happens. And the surgeon, and we say they've got to have reduced amount of clinical service time, and some, hairy surgeon says, no way, not on my patch, they may think they're clever, but they're still got to do it my way and all this stuff. So we have fights about it. But we police it. And on your behalf. So I was very pleased we had a successful outcome with the obstetrics on call route, where one of your previous CLs was being asked to do 100% on call. Is it still, and we managed to.
It's a really jammy setup, actually.
Yeah. That's the last thing I wanted to be saying. I lost so many friends over that battle. Yeah. Yeah. There are several rotors where our CLs are definitely being abused. But please consider this post CCT extension, because essentially you're getting a 2-year research fellowship. It's a fantastic opportunity. So if you think about, if your goal, well, let's come on to that. We're nearly finished here. So, why should you do this? So the NIHR wants you all to become successful academics, by which they mean you get an intermediate or a senior research fellowship. That's the goal. And that's a list of the sorts of things that a medic would do. I haven't put anything that's bespoke for that in maps, but the things would do as well. So that's what the NIHR want. Those of us interviewing will kind of want that, but this is what we're looking for, actually. We want people who are going to be fantastic independent group leaders in Cambridge. That's what we really want. And my old boss, Patrick Chinnery, who now runs the MRC, would often not appoint people at CL posts because he would say, none of these people are worth a Cambridge tenured post. I thought it was a bit harsh, but that was his attitude, and he would wait and wait until someone good came along. He's no longer interviewing. This is an important point. So obviously this is useful training for you. I think this is the point at which it stops being, I'm doing research because I just want to see. I think being an ACF is a great voyeuristic opportunity. Do I want to be a researcher? I think a PhD is a rather traumatic way of finding if you want to be a researcher or not. But honestly, I think that don't do a CL if you think, oh, I'll just see what it's like, it'll be fine. I think that's a disaster. You've got to be completely signed up to it, because it will be really tough. And your fully NHS training colleagues will be swanning past you at roughly twice your rate of progression, and you'll be thinking, why on earth did I go into this? Yeah, so that's why we do it. So very quickly, this is some old data which Louise is updating, but this is, where do people end up? So this is based on 75 clinical lecturers. It's a little bit out of date, as you can see. This is where they end up, first of all, and often that's in an NHS consultant position, first of all, but slightly misleading because many of those move on. So if you get a CL post here, there's a 20% chance you'll end up in an intermediate fellowship, 18% in a consultant, 18% in a substantive academic post, research active, other academic, and so on. And we even have some people who are out on senior fellowships, which if you look at the timing of that is pretty remarkable. So the conversion rate to an academic post is very, very high from a CL. Obviously, that's partly a selection bias, but it's also the training you receive at the time. This is the last thing. This is our old website. I'll refer people to our website. And we do have an emerging website, but soon there'll be loads of information on that. But I think the key point about this evening is getting the key messages across about process. And then come March, you'll begin to get information about posting right here. Right. CL's at the back.
Yeah. Hi.
Do you want to just introduce yourself?
Yeah.
In fact, come over here if you don't mind. Now I think you're alone.
Oh,
I think
it's
you're
just
alone.
me.
It is you.
Okay, well, I'm the least useful because I wasn't in Cambridge.
No. Come on, introduce yourself.
My name's Jen. I'm a clinical lecturer in obstetrics and gynecology. I do kind of data science research. I did my PhD in big data epidemiology, and I'm learning here to transition over to learning bioinformatics.
And you were in?
I was in northeast and central London. So I did my PhD at LSHT and I did my ACF at Queen Mary. I would be the only person to have come from Queen Mary, from kind of northeast London up here.
Yeah. And you're pretty newly here, aren't you?
Yeah, I've been here since October.
Yeah. And would you kind of agree or disagree with anything you've heard so far? Because that would be helpful.
No, I think most of it was pretty clear. The interview was very much. I went to Oxford as an undergraduate, and the interview was very much an Oxbridge interview. I would say it wasn't what I'd been told to prepare for. The people I'd spoken to were about CL interviews were mainly at UCL, and the interview I'd encouraged to prepare for was not the interview I had.
I'm just waiting to know whether the interview being process being described as an Oxbridge is a good thing or a bad thing.
I mean, I enjoyed it a lot more, I think, for that, in the sense that I learned something during that interview, and I learned more about I felt like I had a feel for the job, which I really had, just by the timing of it and everything else, I hadn't really quite understood what the move would be, maybe until I was in the interview, and I was like, actually, this is.
Okay, well, that's good to hear, because I think that is
Yeah.
it's a useful thing.
It's good to hear that was an interview panel.
I can't remember if I was or not. But
No, so just-
that was the one you did, yeah.
Do you mind elaborating on that? It sounds a little bit cryptic.
Oh, is it? Sorry. I'll tell. I don't think it's a secret to tell you what the task was. First of all, it was advertised on the University of Cambridge website, and the only reason I knew about it is because I had a Google Jobs alert for clinical lecture in obstetrics, and I'd had it for a while.
No one told you.
Nobody told me about this post. Nobody told, and I emailed Prof Smith, who I've met, Gordon Smith, who I've met lots of times and reviewed a couple of papers I've written and other things, and I said, "Oh, can I apply for this job?" And he was like, "Oh, do you know that's a job?" And I don't.
We're trying to keep it secret.
So I don't know, but first of all there was that, and then we had to give a short talk.
I did.
So you had to give 7-minute talk, 3 slides about who you were, what you'd done, and why this job was the right job for you, which is actually a very difficult task, I think.
I think they've stopped that now.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Fine.
So that didn't go down well as another interview with one of the interviewers.
Fair enough. I thought it definitely took me a while to prepare for it, but maybe preparing for it was very helpful.
Yeah. I mean, I think leaving aside that you won't be asked to do that as an exercise, I think preparing for, why this project, why this place is a key approach. Yeah. Yeah. And now you've arrived, how is the CL working out, and is it what you're expecting, and are you getting to do the research you want to do?
Yes. I think it's difficult to transition at this point, and I think I probably underestimated how difficult that would be, in the sense that you arrive somewhere and you don't really know anybody and you don't really know anything. I think that, so I've been here for nearly 5 months now, and I don't feel like I'm as far on as I could be in 5 months.
And is that worse on the clinical side or the research?
The clinical side's been absolutely great in many ways, and it's not because the research side is in any way under supported. I don't feel in any way that I'm not being supported, and in fact, it's a good combination of talking to people, but not being kind of managed too much. I think it's just that I had quite a lot of fact finding to do, probably for the first 3 months, and then it was Christmas, and now it's just been half term, and now I'm kind of like, oh right, okay, I feel like I've not really done very much in 5 months, but actually I have done some things, and I have finished some things and started some things and learned some things. But learning to do everything has been new for me personally. So like every single thing I've done has been like, oh, I need to work out this infrastructure.
I mean, I completely sympathise with that, and I think moving anywhere is usually a much bigger hit on research than clinical practice, because research in the end is all about very local knowledge or very specific knowledge, and you have to acquire that. I mean, some of you may have had that experience doing a PhD that you, looking back, you didn't actually achieve anything for a few months other than get yourself orientated and to learn where the loo was, and how to get your pipettes working and stuff. Yeah, interesting. Yeah,
I think that's particularly interested in the kind of that aspect of your journey where you went from, somewhere where you did your clinical and your research in London, and then you moved to London. Because I just assumed people were finding great CLs would have long-term relationships with the department, with researchers. So when it came to interview, it'd be like a long spiel, and this is Prof X who I thought this long, you know, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. My PhD was fairly unusual because I did my PhD at LSHTM, and my clinical
London School of
been
Hygiene.
in charge of the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, which does not normally host obstetricians. So there isn't a clear clinical place to be based and to then be an academic at the school that typically only hosts people for clinical lecture posts in kind of parapsychology and public health. So actually on the day I did this job interview, I then got offered a locally funded lecture post as soon as I got home, as soon as I had been offered this job by LSHTM, which was very strange. I don't think my old supervisor had kind of phoned me and said, "Oh, you need to meet on Zoom," and I was like, "Well, I can do that afternoon. I'm free." Yeah, it was like, "Oh, actually, we'd like to offer you a job," and I was like, "Because we've just heard that you would like a job," and I hadn't really expected that, or even asked for it. And maybe if I had, I wouldn't be here. But also then I would have had the issue of splitting clinical and academic time, which I had immediately post PhD because I'd done my PhD quite junior, and I think that is also quite difficult. I am really, really, really wanted to be in an integrated post. It makes such a huge difference to be in an integrated post.
Are you doing research in clinical practice mixed in the week?
Yes, I am. Yeah, because I've always done that. I've done that since my ACF, and so far it's worked okay. And also the sort of thing I do, it's almost impossible not to. It allows me a degree of flexibility around going to things. Like I sit on grant panel, like a grant panel and a college thing, and there's the odd thing that just kind of comes up, and then you kind of have to go to that. And at the moment, I tell people what I'm doing only a couple of months in advance, which actually allows me a great deal of flexibility around things that are external that I need to attend. So that's been really, really helpful for me.
You have the questions, yeah.
I'd be a pain. I've got a list of a few questions.
He's written them down.
But I don't think it was the wider group. I've had mixed advice about the extent to which the 50/50 academic training extends training time or not.
I can answer this because
Yeah.
this does come up. So Mr. Walport is the guy who invented academic training. He's I don't know if you've come across him. So he's one of these big beasts of academic medicine. And this is 20 years ago. And he decreed that all of these posts, ACFs, CLs, would acquire clinical training credit at 100%. So if you do a 4-year CL, you get 4 years of clinical training credit was the default position. And that is in all the paperwork. The reality, though, is that only psychiatry can manage that, because only in the Department of Psychiatry do they think that you can acquire clinical training at half time. At the opposite extreme, you have the neurosurgeons who, and I do understand this, you just acquire credit as you accumulate it in your logbook or whatever. So it's at half time. And then a lot of the medical specialities will do a sort of compromise in between those things. So neurology, diagnostic, cardiology, rheumatology, you're very unlikely to get through 100%, but it won't be 50%. It'll be some. And if you do a very clinical subject, that will be recognised. So in practice, how does this work? So my suggestion to all TPDs is that when you start, you're given a CCT date is changed as though you accumulate at 50%. So it'd be quite a long way. And then as you go, that CCT date can be brought forward as you accumulate your credits. What used to happen is that people went in with their old CCT date and then they were given outcome 3s at LCP. And that's quite disappointing. And particularly some of our alpha academics thought this was a complete outrage and a personal slur, and would involve the Archbishop of Canterbury and all sorts of people in discussion. So it's much easier now just to move the CCT as though you were going to accumulate 50%, unless you're doing psychiatry. But none of these considerations. Does that kind of make sense? Has anyone talked to you about your CCT
Oh,
now?
that's a very good question. It depends on, there will be a shortly vacant post for somebody to do some subspecialty training. And we're still trying to decide what I'm going to do. And I need to go and speak to the head of the subspecialty training committee. That's my actual, because my husband has just finished his CL, which is what enabled me to do my CL. And he was not allowed to extend in paediatric subspecialty. He was not allowed to compress.
This is grid training.
Yeah, so grid training, and so I'm in obstetrics and I will be doing maternal fetal medicine. It's extremely difficult to speed up subspecialty training, even though I will probably enter subspecialty training with 3 of the 4 modules signed off for subspecialty. It's a difficult thing to change, but I'm going to go and speak to the head of subspecialty training because I would like to finish training at the end of the CL.
Yeah, so we always have a problem with paediatrics. Who's a paediatrician?
Me.
Yeah. With grid training and perioperative care, we have the same sort of problem. So these, for those of you who are not doing one of these specialities, these are formal training schemes for subspeciality. Not like in neurology where you just declare that you're an MS doctor. But you actually have to do some work and you compete for a place on that. And in paediatrics, at the moment, they're not accepting clinical lecturers at half time in any of the grid training. So if you know in advance, you can kind of work your way around this. But we've had 2 paediatric CLs resign from their CL post in order to do grid training because it wasn't going to work, which is really frustrating. And I don't know why the paediatricians in charge of this phase of training are so miserable about it. We've got a CL doing perioperative and it's all been discussed. That's working out really well.
Can I just ask about that grid training thing? So I've got 3 years left for CCT, but only 2 years of grid training that I'm accountable for because I've got 24 months in oncology. So is that just a 24 months, which will need to be done? That 3rd year that I still have floating in the air would be irrelevant? Or
So
it might be of too specific question for here.
well, it's not too specific. It's just I'm not the one who makes the call on it.
Okay.
You'll have to talk to the grid training people.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. It's a specific problem, but it can be an issue. Joe, is there anything else? We'll come back to Cyrus. Joe, is there anything else that you feel we should cover? What about your guys, Ian Macklin? Is anything that we're saying here not applicable to them?
Most of it in terms of the NMAPs are obviously already in a clinical position, and so they don't need to worry about training. So that's a complexity that we don't
We should run
have.
GPs instead.
Yeah.
So GP clinical lecturers are fully trained GPs.
Yeah. So a lot of this is fascinating to listen to the complexity of this. But we have other challenges, but this isn't necessarily the challenges that the NMAPs have. And obviously, it's interesting hearing about the teaching part of it. Obviously, we don't have any undergraduate programs here in University of Cambridge, so our teaching isn't quite. You might be involved in real, but not the same challenges.
Thank you. Well, hopefully this time next year there'll be some NMAP CLs sitting here and we can broaden our experience of all of this. So
it was a similar question on timing of things.
Yeah.
Am I right in saying that you can't be appointed if you're in your last year of
That's
training? But there might be some flexibility on when your last year of training, so you can get it pushed back and things to make things work.
exactly. I mean, this is what we've certainly in neurology, any subject with a kind of savvy TPD, you can manipulate all of these dates in order to put yourself at best advantage. Yeah, so we're certainly pulled back a CCT date to make that work. And I mean, you may be kind of a bit horrified about the way I'm speaking about this, but I want to justify it really because I think these are very precious post CLs. Very, very precious. The most upsetting thing for me is when we don't make an appointment. I think that's really sad. We have done that. But then we recycle it, and hopefully we do. So that one I showed you at the bottom, they've really got to a point, otherwise I'm going to be furious. But also, not, as you heard, not many people apply, and that's because not many people are in this territory. And so if we've got someone really good, I'm all for manipulating things so they get a chance at the interview, at a competitive interview. You know, they've got to go up against someone else. But it's a terrible shame. For instance, we had someone who I was told was really good, just submitted their PhD. We lined up an interview, and actually they hadn't submitted their PhD. So that collapsed. I was furious about that. And you know, it's just a waste of a precious opportunity, because it's not like we have 10 other applicants to see.
I suppose on that, what's the difference between, like, you know, if you have two very good people, or three, what in your experience distinguishes between them?
So it's not unusual if we interview for 3 specialities that there'll be the speciality leads will not agree. You know, there will be either 2 or 3 top candidates in the eyes of the interviewers, and that's where the chair has to intervene, or someone like Joe who's independent. I mean, I actually quite like Patrick Chinny's question. You know, is this person going to be leading a group in a university like Cambridge? And I would tend to pick on that. And you may say, well, what does that mean? For me, that's a really good research proposal. Good in the sense that it's answering an important question. It's really clear that everything is in place to achieve it, that it's feasible, that, you know, this person is being sensible. Not good as in it's a ridiculously ambitious thing. Does that make sense?
If you're an LTFT trainee,
Yeah.
how does that work around? Is there a minimum?
Yeah. There is a minimum. It works out at about 6 or 7 years. So the rule is that the least amount of research you can do is 1 point something days a week, something like that. And if at 50%, it's like 3 and a bit days a week. So the least is either 3 and a bit or 4 days a week you can do in entirety. So that ends up as being a 6-year CM. Yeah.
We need additional funding alongside.
Yeah, so all you get is your salary.
Yeah.
And £1,000 a year to spend for fun. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bursary for travelling to conferences, basically.
Yeah, but you get no consumables. However, you should apply for an Academy of Medical Sciences grant. Have you applied?
Didn't have a clear question for this deadline. I've got a clear question for, I think, for the next deadline.
Yeah. So we have a 60% pass rate or success rate, and that will give you £40,000, which is really good because it's may well be your first grant. I don't know, but and it's the easiest one for you to get. And if you don't get it first time, well worth applying a second.
I just plug in that
Yeah.
the BRC, hopefully annually, but for the next couple of years, will be putting out patient and public involvement grants for PhDs and clinical lecturers.
That's really useful.
So very small pots of money, but I suggest that you would all be eligible, and certainly the pots of money are there for the taking.
Yeah. But I think it is important that, like with a sensible research plan, you know where the money's going to come from. And that should really come from your supervisor in the first instance. I don't know whether you've had any help.
Yeah, a little bit for data access and
Yeah.
things like that. And I used to put a grant and something on to get some data storage, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Because you can't really just put that in. There is a kind of startup cost, and I actually have some money sitting at Queen Mary where I previously had a kind of 2-day-a-week contract, but that's finishing, and it's quite. You almost need like a little pot. It's like when you're a PhD student again, you need a little bit of money. But if you're in the same department, I think it's very straightforward.
Yeah.
And speaking of our supervisors, is the expectation that we remain with the same PI going from PhD into CL, or should we be demonstrating more independence?
Yeah. I mean, there's a real tension here, isn't there? And I think the kind of preferred position is that you move away from your PhD supervisor and you acquire a new supervisor or mentor, and there's a logic behind that. However, for many of you, you've done a great PhD, you're having a really good experience, and you want to do more of the same or something slightly different in the same environment, and it makes sense to have the same supervisor. And I completely, I think a panel will completely recognise the logic of one or the other, but you'd have to defend it. Is that fair, Jo?
I think as long as you can give a good rationale and how the relationship might change.
Yeah.
As you're kind of going, I think it's.
Because this is absolutely, these 4 years of clinical lecture posts are absolutely the time to cut the umbilical cords. And so if you start off with your old PhD supervisor, that's fine, but you've got to have a clear pathway to ending up very differently. Which is a bit artificial in truth. If you've got a good, generous supervisor, you shouldn't feel the need.
I think this is slightly related to, like, I didn't phrase it very well. It's where I was coming from earlier with one of my questions. Is when you apply to Cambridge, you have a really well thought out project. It's ready to be submitted to the grant. If a post randomly opens up in Birmingham and I just want to do an ACL, and I know there are good people that do research in the field that I'm interested in, but I haven't worked out a really good grant which takes ages to write. Like, do you get right?
I mean, how well worked out was your research plan?
Not well. I knew a fair amount about, so I suppose I knew a fair amount about what was going on here. I probably didn't know, and there was definitely holes in my knowledge. My overall aim, I thought, was well worked out, maybe in the sense that I knew sort of what my interest was and what my kind of transition was, but obviously I didn't know what I didn't know, and I had basically about 20 minutes of time to discuss this in advance. It wasn't a lot.
That's quite a lot for Gordon.
Yeah.
He doesn't talk a lot.
No, I've had 24 minutes, but I'd read enough. But I think, I don't have a full understanding of what is being done in the department now. And I think that would take me a lot longer to understand to completion. So.
But you were impressed by her, Jo. Yeah. And do you remember thinking it was a good research plan, or what do you remember thinking about?
So I think there was two things. I think you communicated complexity really well. So and that's a key message, is that it's about really well thought out research plans, but it's the ability to communicate that to actually an audience. There's maybe only one person in the panel knows your field, and you did that really well. I think the other thing is, and it was another member of the panel that commented, you answered your answer to your clinical question was outstanding. I don't know if you remember what you even said, probably not. Okay. But you really spoke through your clinical situation, and when the panel were making the decision, that was the question that really stood out.
Yeah, thank you. And that leads me to make a point. So we do want good doctors. Don't be under any misunderstanding. So if there's any sense that you're dodgy doctors, and I'm sure you're not, if that comes across, then you just don't stand a chance. So it's the high bar is academic, but also in your clinical ability. Usually people don't get that far because usually TPDs and so on won't advance someone who's not a good doctor. But remember, you're going to be a senior person in that clinical department. You're going to be probably organising rotas at some point, or organising a calendar day. You're going to have that sort of profile. And if you're not engaged in clinical work, that's the last. I think in terms of the CL in Birmingham, if the CL post is advertised in Birmingham in March that you really want to go to, I'd really encourage you to visit, to identify someone and visit.
It's like ages away. It's only
okay.
But it's just
it's that
interesting thing to do.
I think turning up and saying, I really fancy being in Birmingham, I've got this idea, will lead to someone saying, well, where are you going to do it? In which building? Who with? What kit do you need? Who's going to pay for that? You'll soon be exposed if you haven't worked out some of them.
On the theme of other institutions, if somebody was very lucky and got an offer for a CL at a different institution, earlier than the one made here, but then perhaps wanted to say come here instead. What are is there any specific rules for NIH? Because obviously with the ACF, all the offers come out at the same time, and it's very regimented. You have 48 hours to accept or decline. It seems a bit more up in the air with.
Well, it's organised by each university. So, I mean, I wouldn't recommend this, but if you wanted to hold your position on a CL somewhere else and do interviews here for a CL, you'd have to negotiate that just like with any other post. So I can tell you absolutely we wouldn't buy that. So we would offer it to you in a day or two, the interview, and we'd expect you to accept. If you said I want to hold it somewhere else, we'll say no. I'd say no. Whatever anyone else said. These are precious things.
If we're
Sorry if that sounded.
No, not at all. No, not at all.
if we're not successful, two parts to the question. Can you apply again in the subsequent round?
Sure.
Without any?
Sure.
Okay.
We do see that. We definitely see that. We've seen people 2 or 3 times and be successful.
And do you know where people end up who aren't successful with sale posts? Is there data about what pathway they go down?
We don't have that data. If I asked Louise to get that data, she'd probably murder me. Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I definitely know some technology CLs, and I think that choice was that selection was justified. You know, they haven't done that well. You know, and I've definitely known people who've tried 3 times and got in the 3rd time and been, done spectacularly. Because the trouble is, you might be up against the world's best cardiologist on that day, who's just won the International Cardiology, Nobel Prize or something. And it's just your bad luck, You're fantastic, but you're just not that fantastic.
The many clinical academics come from routes that are not CLs, looking at it the other way.
Yes, I mean, obviously CLs haven't been around for that long. So if you look at, my grade, none of us came from CLs that didn't exist. If you look at, I don't think we've got those sums, but there are plenty of people who come in who haven't been in CLs, plenty. Be the majority of them. I sense we're drying up and we're coming to time. I just want to check, Louise, is there anything important we've missed out, procedure-wise?
No, I don't think so.
Tyler, anything you can think of?
I will just say that we will be sending out the slides and the recording of this after, tomorrow at this point.
Thank you.
So if you don't worry, if you haven't got any notes or anything like that, we will send out the talk so you can listen to it whenever you want.
Yeah. And Joe, anything you wanted to add? Joe? I mean, I just want to end on a positive point. I think getting a CL is a fantastic opportunity. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
I just think I wish I'd been able to get a CL back in the day. I think it's a wonderful blend of clinical and academic. It's a really good training in how to be a clinical academic, because you're training in how to combine these 2 things, which you don't really do as a PhD student. It's a great launch for this. I'd encourage you all to apply if you're seriously interested in the academic life, even if you don't make it. There's no harm to be done other than a mild bruise to your ego, modest bruise. Okay. Thanks all for coming, folks. I wish you all the best. We'll be hosting this every year, so if there's if you're a bit way off, you're welcome to come back again. Otherwise, thank you very much.